He loves you silently, but disappears after getting close. Carl Jung, he got close, then disappeared. No fight, no cheating, no big moment of betrayal. Just one day, he stopped showing up. He didn't block you. He didn't break up. He just faded. You replay the last conversation. It felt real. His words were soft. His eyes lingered. You could feel something in him reaching toward you. And then, silence. What happened? How can a man open up to you, hold you close, look at you like he's finally found what he wasn't looking for, and still vanish just when it starts to feel safe? The truth is, he didn't leave because he felt nothing. He left because he felt too much. Carl Jung once said, "The unconscious speaks through the body before it finds the words." And sometimes love terrifies a man long before it touches his heart, especially when he's never been taught what to do with something real. Some women don't cry out when they're breaking. They don't cause a scene. They don't beg. They simply get quiet. They start pulling back their energy from conversations, from moments, from the emotional spaces they once tried so hard to fill. They no longer reach across the distance. They no longer wait by the phone. And slowly, quietly, they stop hoping. It's not bitterness, it's not withdrawal, it's something far more powerful, it's clarity. You see, a woman's silence is often misunderstood. It's labeled as moody, distant, or dramatic, but many times it means she's finally hearing her own voice, the one beneath the noise, not the one that's been conditioned to say, "Be softer, be nicer, be more forgiving," but the one that whispers, "You've done enough. You don't have to chase love to deserve it." And when that shift happens, when she begins to return to herself, the man who once felt close to her feels it too. He may not understand what's happening. He might not know why she feels different, but something in him changes. He doesn't run because he's lost interest. He doesn't step back because he's stopped feeling. He steps back because something real is now in the room, and he doesn't know how to stand still in front of it. Carl Jung once said, "When the unconscious is touched, it often pulls away, not from rejection, but from reverence." And to some men, closeness doesn't feel like safety. It feels like danger, not because of you, but because real love speaks a language they were never taught to understand. It's confusing, the way he shifts, the way he holds your hand like it's a lifeline, then lets go without explanation. He used to show up, ask how you slept, notice the small things, tell you he felt something different with you, something calm, something true. There were no red flags, no mixed signals, until suddenly there were now. You wait longer between his messages. The jokes feel more distant. The way he looks at you, less steady. He says he's busy, tired, thinking about a lot, but something deeper tells you he's drifting. You didn't change. You didn't demand more. In fact, all you did was start relaxing into the connection. You let your guard down. You let him in. And that's when he started to leave. This is the part that shatters so many women, the timing. He didn't pull away when you were hard to reach. He pulled away when you finally let yourself feel close, because now it's real. Now. The intimacy isn't potential, it's presence, and not everyone knows what to do with presence. Some men are deeply drawn to connection until they feel it reach back, until they realize you're not just a fantasy, you're available, you're safe, and that's when their nervous system panics. It's not about you being too much, it's about him not knowing how to receive something that doesn't hurt. Carl Jung said the things we reject in ourselves, we project onto others. So, when a man hasn't made peace with softness, intimacy, or trust, he may quietly push away the very woman who offers it, not because he doesn't feel it, but because it feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar to a wounded man feels dangerous. It's one of the most painful things a woman can feel, knowing deep down that he cares, but watching him act like he doesn't. He doesn't say it. He doesn't chase. He might even pull away. But still, Something in you knows. Because love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and the men who are most afraid of love often show it in the quietest, strangest ways. Let's talk about what those ways might look like. The subtle signs. He loves you, but can't admit it. Hot and cold behavior. He shows up with intensity. The way he looks at you is different. He shares things he says he hasn't told anyone else. He's warm, open, present. Then, suddenly, he's distant. A little colder. A little shorter in his replies. Like he's pulling a blanket off just as things are getting warm. This push-pull isn't about playing games. It's often a man trying to regulate feelings that feel too big, too fast, because emotional closeness to him may trigger old wounds, abandonment, rejection, unworthiness. It's not that he doesn't feel, it's that he feels too much, and he's scared of drowning in it. Self-sabotage, you've seen it. Everything's going well, and suddenly he picks a fight over nothing, or he disappears for a few days, or he makes a comment that distances the connection. This isn't just immaturity, it's fear disguised as control. He might think, if I end it first, I won't be the one who gets hurt. Or worse, if she gets too close, she'll see the parts of me I've spent my life hiding. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the rejected self that lives in the dark, afraid of being exposed. And when love gets too bright, some men run back into the shadows because that's the only place they've ever felt safe. Body language that betrays him. He may say he's not looking for anything serious, but his body tells another story. He remembers small things you said. He leans in when you speak. His eyes soften when you're near. There's a tenderness in the way he brushes past you, the way he lingers a second longer than necessary. He checks on you when you're quiet. He smiles at your voice. He glances at you when you're not looking. The body doesn't lie. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious finds its way to the surface through slips of action, tone, posture. Even if his mouth says, I don't know, his energy says, I feel something. 4. Protectiveness. Without possessiveness, he doesn't try to own you, but he looks out for you. He reminds you to rest. He gets worried when you're upset. He notices when something feels off. He might not say much, but he's watching. Quietly checking in from the sidelines. It's not control, it's care. And for a man who's never felt safe in love, that kind of care is terrifying to feel, let alone speak. He pulls away when things get good, perhaps the most heartbreaking. Sign of all, he disappears right when it starts to feel safe, not when you argue, not when things are unstable, but when you relax, when you start believing in the connection, when he starts to feel like home. That's when he goes quiet. That's when the message is slow. That's when the uncertainty creeps in, not because it wasn't real, but because it was. And for some men, real is the most frightening thing of all. These signs don't excuse the behavior. They don't mean you should wait around, hoping he'll come back. But they do offer insight into the mind of a man who loves silently and disappears not because he doesn't care, but because he's still at war with his own heart. And sometimes love doesn't ask to be understood. It just wants to be seen for what it is in the space between what's said and what's shown. Carl Jung believed that much of what drives us, especially the behaviors we don't understand, doesn't come from reason. It comes from the unconscious. From the hidden parts of ourselves we've buried, disowned, or never even knew existed. 4. Many men, one of the most deeply buried truths is this. Love feels threatening when you've never experienced it as something safe. They weren't taught to feel. They were taught to perform. To win, to control, to hide their softness behind strength, to equate vulnerability with weakness. They learned, either directly or by silence, that emotions make them less of a man. So they learned to suppress them. And then they meet a woman who feels safe, a woman who shows up with warmth, presence, consistency. She doesn't demand, she invites, she doesn't test, she trusts, and that terrifies him. Not because she's wrong, but because her love begins to activate. Something in him he's never confronted. His shadow. Jung described the shadow as the unaccepted self, the collection of feelings, beliefs and wounds we were told not to have, so we locked them away. But they don't disappear, they just grow louder, underground, and they leak out, in sabotage, avoidance, anxiety, silence. That's why some men sabotage the very connection they ache for. Because love, real love, doesn't just comfort, it exposes. It shows them the parts of themselves they've avoided for decades. The fear of abandonment, the hidden shame, the guilt from past hurt, the terror of not being good enough. So when intimacy arrives, when it's steady, safe and present, he doesn't relax. He braces, not because you're dangerous, but because his nervous system doesn't recognize peace. It only knows survival, and to someone who's spent a lifetime surviving, peace feels suspicious. Jung also warned us about projections, how we often fall in love, not with the person in front of us, but with an image our unconscious has created. And when that image starts to crack, when reality begins to shine through, many men don't know how to handle it. They weren't trained to stay for what's real. They were trained to chase fantasy or run from it altogether. Because to stay means letting themselves be seen, truly seen, and for a man who has never felt witnessed without shame, being seen isn't love, it's exposure. That's why some men disappear right when things get good, not because they've stopped caring, but because they're overwhelmed by how much they feel. And until they make peace with that shadow, until they face those inner ghosts, they'll keep running, not from you, but from the reflection you unknowingly hold up to them. What if his silence had nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with his wounds? What if he didn't pull away because you were too much, but because he'd never learned how to stand still in front of something true? So many women carry this kind of ending like a bruise on the soul. They turn it inward. They whisper, maybe I overwhelmed him. Maybe I should have held back. Maybe love isn't meant for me. But the truth is simpler and harder. You didn't scare him, your presence did. Your openness, your wholeness, your ability to meet him without judgment, because when love is real, it doesn't just feel good. It holds up a mirror, and not everyone is ready to see themselves reflected in it. Carl Jung taught that true healing begins when we stop chasing our projections, when we stop trying to earn love through performance, and start embodying it. You didn't fail by loving. You didn't break anything by showing up with tenderness. If anything, you awakened something in him, something he wasn't ready for, and that's not your burden to carry. Real love doesn't shrink you to fit someone else's fear. It expands you into more of who you are. So if he left when it got real, it's not proof that you were too much. It's a sign that he wasn't yet whole enough to stay. But you stay with yourself, with your heart, with your inner truth. Because love isn't about who stays, it's about what stays with you long after the person is gone, and you were never meant to be almost anything. Not almost loved, not almost chosen, not almost safe. You were meant to be met, fully, clearly, and without apology, and anyone who can't hold that light was never ready for the fire it came from. Have you ever loved someone who never said it back but showed it in all the ways that didn't last? Have you ever felt a man pulling away, not because the love was gone, but because it was finally getting real? If that's you, you're not alone. There's a whole generation of women, wise, open-hearted, beautifully awake, who've confused a man's silence with their own failure, who've internalized the quiet as rejection when in truth, it was fear, not theirs, his. So let's talk about it. Leave a comment below. I wasn't too much. I was just real. If this message touched a part of you that never had the words, say it out loud. Say it for the woman you used to be. Say it for the next woman still learning to stay with herself. And if you know someone, a sister, a daughter, a friend who keeps questioning why he pulled away when things felt close. Send her this video. Let her know she's not invisible, she's not crazy, she's not alone. And if you want more stories like this, truth told with tenderness, psychology, with soul, subscribe. Because healing isn't meant to be done in silence, and love was never meant to feel like guessing.